So where are we at right now? Just give me the general 3,000.
So we're here in Augusta County, Virginia, which is in the Shenandoah Valley between Rockingham and Rockbridge County. We're east of Highland County. This is the second largest agriculture county in the state. And you'll have to check my facts, but I think we are number one in the state for beef animals.
Okay, so how many of your neighbors are also running beef?
All of them.
Are they?
To some extent, in Augusta County, pretty much to some extent, if you have land, you have some form of beef animal, whether that's a couple beeves you buy seasonally to put in your 5-acre lot to feed, or you run a few feeder cattle seasonally, or you have a few mama cows. Typically, pretty much everywhere you drive in Augusta County, if you look over a fence somewhere, there's a black cow walking.
Yeah, yep. And so it's pretty much all black Angus?
Yep, so a lot of the genetics in the valley especially are Angus-based. We run a commercial cow herd here, so we have Angus-based genetics, but we also have Simmental influence. We do have some Hereford influence back several generations with our body cows. We have run some Limousine influence occasionally years ago, but we run what's referred to as commercial cow herd.
So you just threw out a bunch of names that I think most people in general, knowing Angus they've heard. Mm-hmm. The other ones they have not. So what are aspects of, why are those genetics in there?
There's a long drawn out explanation for it. We have two that we use here. One, genetic shakeup. The Angus breed, as a purebred breed, are not known for their longevity because of feet and leg issues. Mm-hmm. So we introduce these other breeds to help mix up that genetic base, to help clean their feet up, clean their udders up, basically make the cows last longer. Yeah. Once they're here and producing, and two, kind of be better mothers. Angus have a pretty good mothering instinct, as do the Herefords, and as do the Simmentals.
So it's interesting because we talk about this with grapes and wines. We keep trying to raise these vinifera, right? European grapes, and it's you realize you have to spray less, you have to do less to it if it fits the environment better. What about cattle fits the environment of Shenandoah Valley? Why are there so many cattle as opposed to, corn or something else?
Well, in the valleys, in the bottoms, we do have good river bottom to grow corn. We do have good river bottom to grow row crops. But, not to get biblical, but the good Lord, when he built this place, knew what he was doing. You get rocks and cedar bushes and ledges that you can't bush hog or row crop over. By God, a cow can walk across it and eat grass and make pounds.
I gotcha. Okay. Yep. So the environment does kind of fit that, as opposed to somewhere else in Virginia too.
Yep. Livestock in general suits the ground here better, and that's why you used to see a lot of sheep in Highland County, was because that just
rough terrain
used to fit the sheep better.
That's interesting. And then how have you grown up here? You said 6th generation?
Yep, I'm 6th generation. My kids are 7th.
Okay, they're already working?
No, my oldest one. My oldest one wants to. She's going on 7 years old and thinks that she can swing a hammer like a 15-year-old boy.
Already wants to. You've been here for a while. You've seen that too. Have a lot of your friends stopped farming? A lot of neighbors, stuff like that. Have you seen them shut down or starting up?
We've seen a lot of older guys go out. Their families have no interest in taking over. Consolidated, whatever you want to call it. There's multiple aspects of that play in. One, farming on paper is not super profitable. It gives you good cash flow, and if you're intelligent and you manage correctly and the whole 9 yards, you can make a living through that cash flow. But it's not. You're not going to be a millionaire farming. You might have millions of dollars worth of things, right, but you're not going to be a millionaire farming. And
unless you start off.
Unless you start, you're right. But the second side of that, people look at money and say, "Oh, there's no money in it. You can't be, whatever." The second part of that is there is definitely a cash barrier to getting started. Oh, yeah. Me and my wife just bought our first piece of property here a couple years ago, and if it wasn't for the family wanting to own or finance that to us, that wouldn't have been feasible. And When you're talking about the next generation farmer, really the next generation farmer depends on the previous generation.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of this mindset, unfortunately, with the older generation that I've put my time in, this is my retirement, I need to get every dime I can get out of
Squeeze it.
Well, that's fine if you want to build houses on it.
Yep, and turn it into a development.
Or put a Walmart Supercenter on
Yep.
it. But unfortunately, there needs to be, in my opinion, there is interest in younger people to farm.
Yeah.
And come back to, for not trying to be like weird, but come back to the land. I mean, there's always been a draw to people to come back. There's no place closer to home than actually coming home to the farm.
Yeah.
And, for me, I get to live that reality every day, and that's nice, but that's just not feasible for some people. Unfortunately, if you're a first-generation farmer trying to get into it, you need that mentor that's willing to help you buy the property at a significant amount less than even maybe what that property is worth on open market.
Right, what that market value is.
And we need that. That's part of the thing that even I think Farm Beer could help with, is we need to get that understanding through to some of this older generation. Like, these guys need you. They don't need you to help sign the, they don't need you to help process the cattle. They don't need you to help plant the corn.
But the hand up.
They need the hand up.
Yeah.
And, you hear the term, what is it called? Corporate farming, corporate agriculture. Well, there's a reason for consolidation and incorporation in agriculture.
Yeah.
And it's because you can't, if you don't have people that are willing to give you that leg up and go, it's basically unfeasible.
Right.
I mean,
it's funny you say that. I have not thought of that necessarily in terms of, I always think about, it's funny, the rich farmers feed the poor and the poor farmers feed the rich, right? And these little small organic farms and these other things too. But in terms of the transition point too, I've been trying to look at young, people that are in the city that have watched a documentary or something like that, and they want to come out. There's a romantic sense, but it's not the romance of hard work, blood, sweat, and soil. It's this bucolic dream kind of thing. And I've even talked to people that are very affluent, like, yeah, buy land. Here's how you would, rent it out too. But you're very right. We have a huge land transition that's in the works. It's coming.
Happens every generation.
And so I always make the same. How many siblings you got?
I've got two other siblings.
Two other siblings?
Yep.
You're not the middle, are you?
I am the middle.
Oh, me too. All right, middle of three boys. So in terms of what you see ahead, is farming getting easier or is it getting harder?
Definitely harder. And, nowadays, especially, I don't know much about the dairy thing, but I do know it in the feeder cattle, and it's pretty similar because you're dealing with rations and costs per head and the whole 9 yards. There's efficiency in size, unfortunately. And the bigger you are, and that's where I don't like the term corporate farming or industrial farming, big ag. It's not big ag, because a lot of times you look at these families, and it's families that have consolidated together to survive.
Right.
It's not about making more money.
Right.
It's about surviving long enough that the next generation can take it and go on. So I get real, and it's just me, and I can't help it, I get real offended at that term.
Yeah.
Because we could be considered one. I mean, we operate on 2,600 acres. We have thousands of head of cattle when we're at full capacity between the feeder barns and between the cow-calf herd. And, there's some people out here in Wonderland that would walk in here and say, oh my gosh, it's a big corporate farm. No, it's not. It's me and my dad and some employees.
Yep. Well, this is what happens. Ignorance becomes bliss. We step further away from knowing what the food system is, and when we have less, to be very fair, like small farmers, you have to, like you said, the survival part. If I know a family that says we're fifth generation, we're whatever that is, and they've been doing it for a while, it has been that. They all survived the late 60s, early 70s, get big, get out, right? And that was literally efforts to consolidate and vertically integrate. And then it becomes, I feel bad a lot of the times because I don't knock on any big farm or small farm. What it's really about, though, is we just don't have farmers.
Well, and you're talking about big, small farm, big farm, whatever. And you also said something that
I'd say medium.
Gives me heartburn is organic.
In what way? Yeah. No, I get it.
Well, organic doesn't give me heartburn because of the way that they practice.
It's how people use the term.
It's how people, one, use the term, and two, weaponize it against production agriculture. Like we're doing something wrong.
No, I know. So I just did a video recently about this. The certification is nothing.
This is also another thing. There's multiple problems within the agriculture community. I think lobbying is one of them. You know, talking generational movement of land is another, finding more farmers to cover the ground. But two, I realize I'm not so ignorant to believe that there's not niches that can't be filled by people, and people can't be profitable and do well for themselves at it.
But they don't need to.
But they don't need to do it off of running down what I do every day.
That's what I mean. It's the degradation campaign.
And a lot of that, unfortunately, comes from these people that have a romanticized idea of what agriculture should be versus what agriculture needs to be.
Right.
And
they want the convenience, but not the cost.
I'm not talking down anything that they do, because if I'm a strong believer, and if it works for you and you're being successful at it, put the plow in the ground and get after it.
Yep.
But I also believe that as agriculturalists, not farmers, agriculturalists, whether you raise beef, whether you raise row crops, whether you do whatever, as agriculturalists, organic production agriculture, we need to wake up and realize we're on the same team.
Yeah.
Just because we're wearing different shoes doesn't mean that we're all not playing with the same ball.
Yeah. Well.
And until that mentality gets through to people, you hardly ever hear of somebody in production agriculture running down a natural system or running down an organic system or running down this. It's always, those systems, I feel, over the years have been built off of what they perceive we do wrong, right? And until people realize that we're all pulling on the same rope, we're not going to get as far ahead.
I think you're very right about this, and it's kind of like how politics ends up playing.
Oh, absolutely.
We have more in common than we have different, but if it bleeds, it leads in terms of storytelling. And so same thing, especially around, it's so funny, animal welfare and how that gets portrayed a lot of the times too, and how much you don't care, but people want the convenience, but not at the cost of their ignorance.
Well, I had a funny conversation about animal welfare a few years ago with a guy. Didn't know much about agriculture. We were just talking. His family had like some milk cows and chickens growing up, and they had like 5 acres, and it's what they played with, and that's great. Like because it gave the kids experience around animals and understanding, there's nothing that teaches responsibility more than, oh my gosh, it's 12 degrees, snowing, and the wind's blowing outside. I don't want to go out, but Bessie needs fed. And he was talking about, we only eat organic and we do this because they don't confine those animals. I put him in a truck, rode him around, and I have a field over here. It's at a rented farm that I feed cattle on, and it's 50 acres with a barn down at the bottom. And it was about, 100 degrees that day.
Yeah.
And you know what? Those animals have access to that whole 50 acres and the woods and all the nice things that look pretty from a picture. Where were they? In the barn, under the fans, where they were comfortable. It was 15 degrees cooler than it was outside. And I told the guy, I said, here's where people don't understand. What's better for that animal? That it's outside 24/7, or that it has somewhere that it can get in out of the weather. It's comfortable. It's not climate controlled, but when it's hot, we run fans. When it's cold, it's out of the wind.
Right. No, I think there's just a big misconception in the greenwashing too. It really is in the storytelling that it's done the most damage.
Absolutely.
And by the way, even in the organic side of farming, which by the way, you're right, it's such a greenwash term. It's so difficult, and people don't know it all. We did an interview about this recently, just talking about like they change the list every year, and people have this high regard. But people show up to apple farms in Virginia and go, "Do you have organic apple?" It's like you've clearly never raised a fruit tree or fruit in general in your life. Like you can't do that. Like anyways. So this huge misconception. What do you think would help the most? Let's just stick it into cattle though. What do you think is the biggest misconception that people have about cattle? And we can say in Virginia or just in general from the consumer side.
The people that produce them don't care about them.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking, that is the biggest. They think we look at these animals as a cash revenue, just as a paycheck. And we do. We have to. These animals pay the bills around here. These animals pay for the repairs. They pay to employ 5 people around this place on top of me and my father.
Yep.
Okay? So they're a source of income, not just for us, but other families and people outside of them. Okay? But they think just because we look at that animal, oh, they're pumping them full of stuff to do this and do that and what. No. That animal's welfare is actually reason number 1, because an animal that is healthy, comfortable, and happy will always produce more and be worth more than an animal that's not.
Yeah. What do you think, if people wanted to learn more though, what do you think are the baby steps that they can take in terms of, like, they can't, I mean, you don't do farm tours and stuff like that, but
not publicly.
No, but you get what I mean though, that it is difficult for people to get out to farms to see. All they have is some organizations that show them the worst possible, and there are bad situations out there, but they show them the worst possible thing, and that becomes their concept.
You know, when we first talked about doing this, I told you I wasn't going to talk about the fairy tale stuff all the time. If you have livestock, you will have dead stock.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
End of story. We don't do everything perfect around here. We try really hard, but we have bad situations we have to deal with on a week-to-week basis. You know, down cows. Stuff happens, cow breaks a leg, bull goes down. I mean, things can happen.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about, you have these animals out on boundaries of land miles from home, you know, you do the best that you can for those animals, and we really do. But unfortunately, the question you're asking is not an easy one to answer, because the trust has been broken with the public.
Yeah.
Not that the public doesn't trust the people that produce the food, but the people that produce the food can't trust that the public will come here and use some common sense and rationale to interpret what they're seeing.
Yeah.
I've got 40 cows standing over there in that pen on dirt.
Yeah.
Somebody will come in here and go, oh my God, those cows are walking around in a dirt lot. That's so bad. The gate's open to the end of the pen. It's 60 acres on that hill up there.
No, I know.
It's one of those things. The trust has been broken.
Yeah.
The people that produce the food and the public, and not because the public can't trust the people who produce the food.
No.
It's that the people that produce the food cannot trust the public to use common sense to interpret what they see. Or
even
on
give
an
the
operation.
benefit of the doubt. You're right, kind of. There is an onus on farmers that, like, you are guilty.
Absolutely.
You
pollute. There's more runoff coming out of Northern Virginia into the Chesapeake Bay watershed than what comes out of the Shenandoah Valley.
And that's what I mean in terms of the storytelling. It's become very, very difficult to get people to accept that, even to the point that, like, I'm not allowed to show people the butchering process.
Well, we talk about J.W. Truth.
Yeah.
Like, those guys, you know, you talk about kill plants and stuff. Those guys aren't doing anything wrong. They're feeding the world.
Right.
We're feeding the world here.
Right. And people need to choose to eat something different. Anyways, I always got into this too, because farmers would sometimes say that, you know, it's between just consumer and us to consumer. But there's this whole middle group too that has kind of driven down prices on the farmers, or like that middle piece, and they're the ones marketing the food too, talking about what it's going to be labeled as, what it's called. Like,
well, you talk about the middleman. All the meat protein in the world is handled by 5 companies, control 90% of the meat animal protein.
This is in the world or in the U.S.?
Well, it's world. JBS is a Brazilian company.
Oh, that's right.
I mean, you're talking about, for sure, Western Hemisphere.
So do you think that's like an oligopoly that should be broken up, or do you think that would that benefit farmers, or do you think it's how it should be?
It's a hard question, because, you know, once again, they went through the same thing.
Yeah.
Get big or die, and I think it has gone to the point maybe a little bit too far, in my opinion. But I'm also not smart enough to tell you yes or no.
No, I get it. In the global economics of it all.
I do think that there is a benefit to having bigger companies, because it definitely keeps the cost down for the consumer, because they can produce a product way cheaper. I'm sorry, they just can't. It's how the world works.
No, absolutely.
And, you know, when you get to talking about how to feed people and how to fuel the world, You don't want small, dinky companies trying to cut each other's throat.
Right, yeah.
There comes to a certain point where too much competition is just as bad as not enough.
Right.
Now, would I like to see maybe a few more companies?
competition,
Maybe
yeah.
a little more.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying that we need to break up the entire structure, because that's not beneficial to anybody
No,
either.
and it would disrupt so much. And it's the
Right.
same thing when you see new crops starting up too. My brother works in hemp decortification, and right, like hemp farming, and people are really interested, but like you need the infrastructure, the processing, and the end consumer. Like you need all these pieces, and each individual farm cannot be spending time doing any of that. So you need these cooperatives in a sense too. That there is much cooperation between like a few of the especially for meat production, but the cattle farms out here.
There's a lot of cooperation between farmers here. Not necessarily on a management basis. We do have several examples in the area of families that have pitched in together and went and bought farms together, or combined operations because there were no heirs in one family, or so, we do see a lot of that. But there's also daily cooperations. Hey, got cows out. Hey, got tree on the fence.
I know there's the help stuff.
So, yes and no. I think, like I said, I think there's a lot tighter knit community here in the Valley, where we all realize that we're all playing with the same ball, and to keep the ball rolling down the court.
Cool. Last thing I'm gonna ask, what's something you can teach me about cows?
Teach you about cows?
Yeah. What's something you find most people don't realize, but is pretty obvious?
They can kill you.
Okay. That's a fun fact number 2. That one.
No, all joking aside, something to learn about cows is, believe it or not, there's a lot less hormonal treatments on animals than people think. That's one big selling point from some other stuff. No antibiotics ever, no hormones ever. Sorry, if you pick up any piece of meat in the cooler, there's probably at least a 70% chance that an animal, whether it's labeled or not, has never seen an antibiotic or a growth hormone.
Right. It's just the guarantee of that people are,
Right. So, antibiotic free as a selling, and you see this more in chicken than you do in anything on the store shelf. Because they are vertically integrated and they can control it a little better. But chances are that probably never has been treated.
I like that one. And then I always ask every farmer this, but answers are great. Information and getting out there is great. If people aren't empowered to ask better questions, though, you're just going to be handing them information for a lifetime. So what's one better question if somebody met a cattle farmer, even as like an opening question, you know what I mean? Say it's like a first date in the conversation, kind of like, what's a better question that somebody could ask a cattle farmer?
I'm going to turn that one around on you.
Cool.
Because, like we talked about earlier, I strongly believe that production farmers can't trust the public.
Oh, fun. Yeah.
Instead of the other way around, even though that's, I think the first thing that the producer needs to ask the person sitting across the table is, do you trust me?
Yeah.
This country produces the healthiest, cleanest, most abundant food in the world. And there's a reason for that. There's plenty of reasons. I can find 105 reasons not to use a pesticide. I can find 105 reasons not to use an herbicide. I can find 105 reasons not to use a wormer. All that stuff's expensive. But there's a reason we use it. And we don't overuse it.
So how do we rebuild the trust? What's a baby step for that?
Baby step for that, honest to goodness, I think we need to tell stories. But like you said, agriculture has been highly romanticized. And when it does not meet that romantic ideology, people have a problem with it. And I think the baby step is we need to stop romanticizing agriculture, especially production agriculture, and we need to start looking at it from a realistic angle.
Yeah.
Yes, we have bad days. Yes, there's mud. Yes, there's manure. Yes, there's sounds. Yes, there's smells. Yeah, but look at the product you're getting.
Right.
From an adult standpoint, look at the product you're getting in the grocery store. I challenge you to go to a Middle Eastern country somewhere and walk in a grocery store and try to find a product of that quality, of that caliber, sitting on their shelf.
Right. But you romanticize the same thing too. Oh, it was just down the road. It was this person over here. And, it's the same thing too with trying to figure out. I mean, most Americans in general, I don't know how often they come across like botulism or like anything like that they actually do or they know that.
Well, it's because we went away from home canning.
Well, yeah.
You had to make those, you had to learn those lessons the hard way.
I still want raw dairy though. But it is funny even seeing those arguments in a sense too. And like when it goes into mainstream culture and like everybody's trying to get some and then news organizations, everyone's like, it's incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
Be very careful. And it's like, to me, there's always a middle ground, but we stick in polarizing culture of like either trust it and
left side or right side. That's how this entire world is anymore, unfortunately.
I know, and then it's the same thing. I always talk about people, leaning left, leaning right, politically or otherwise, polarizing. How do you find common ground?
Absolutely.
And I would say just look down, talk about the soil. You find out that people, whether they're stewards for God or they're, environmentalists,
absolutely,
they're doing the same game. Right? Take care of, treat it well. It's not yours.
Well, and what people, and that comment right there just brings me back to the whole trust thing. We're not out here to leave the land, the animals, or anything around us any worse than when we got it.
Yep.
Because monetarily, no, that doesn't benefit us.
Yeah.
Two, it doesn't leave anything for the next generation if they want to take it over. Yeah. The strides that we've made in agriculture, and everybody refers to, oh my gosh, the Dust Bowl in the 20s. Well, that's because there were poor agriculture practices implemented it
on a huge scale.
Because we didn't have better technology. That's all we had.
I know.
We didn't have herbicides. Like everybody talks about herbicides and pesticides. You know why we had a Dust Bowl? Was because people were moldboard plowing and disking because there was no herbicide to put down, so you could no-till plant your crops. You had to turn the dirt to control the weeds.
Yeah.
It's like nowadays we have no-till. We have other options here. We have confinement feeding to get the manure and the animals under a roof to eliminate runoff, to create better water quality so your Trout Unlimited can come put trout in Mossy Creek so you can fish out of it for 7 months out of the year. So, we're not here to make it any worse. We're here to make it better, and not just our property.
Yeah.
We have a stream that runs through here. Year-round, 55 gallons a minute. And it has run like that since the dawn of time. I don't want stuff getting into that water because I like going to the spring house and drinking out of it.
Yeah.
And I sure as heck don't want anything that I put in it to float down on the neighbor and make his stuff sick.
Yeah, I think you're incredibly right about that too. It's just that people have now connected scale.
There's been bad actors. I'm not so I'm not so ignorant to believe that there are not bad actors in this world that farm every day. There's bad actors in law enforcement. There's bad actors in Washington, D.C. There's bad actors in that are not looking out for your goodwill. However, for every one of those, there's 10 people that are.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the bad actors come to the fore.
Oh yeah, if it bleeds, it leads.
Yep.
And you can see it and it gets put out there.
And that's what people see.
So I need every time I see a bad story, I need to do 10 boring.
The problem is there's not enough advocacy for the good things that are happening.
I know. Well, and it's hard to highlight too. Like, what is that good decision or that good choice? Because nowadays, good. It's not enough to be a hero nowadays. You have to be
You have to be legendary.
Yeah, you have to do these amazing things, and you didn't just tie it into one checkbox. You tied it into 5 checkboxes, and so it is really tough to tell those stories. But
But the things we need the public to understand is: do you get more boxes checked with each person checking one box, or with one person checking 5?
Right. Right. And it's the small acts that are the most heroic in certain ways too.
And and it's not even about being heroic, but for the longevity of everything that we do, and for the benefit of everybody around us. You know, you take fencing streams, for example, CREP projects and NRCS, and the waters of the U.S. was going to require certain things that were untenable for us. And there is a certain amount of, where do you balance overreach versus requirement? Sure that things get done. I'm not here advocating one way or the other. I don't like the government in my house any more than anybody else. However, I do strongly believe that there are some requirements that should be mandated for the benefit of not just us, but everybody. So, and it's where do you draw the line? Because that's always the gray area. The black and the white is a yes or no answer.
Right.
But the truth.
No, there's nuance.
The truth lies somewhere in the gray area.
Yeah. It's somewhere in the nuance of it all too, though. So that's where middle children kind of strive through, I feel like. Not the oldest.
I'm the favorite child. I'm the only boy in the family.
Are you? No, I'm one of 3 boys. We're very different.
Yeah.
No, this is where I traveled across the country and got into farming and running all over the place. But cool. I don't want to take any more time on this, though. Dude, thank you.
Yeah.
That was great.